Risk factors for heart disease. The big fat surprise.
Transmitter 42.
Today, Kimberley Huggins describes risk factors for heart disease, highlighting many attributes of the American lifestyle that aren't doing Americans any favors towards better health. Her continuing research offers surprising new observations about what our food supply is doing to us and describes what symptoms to look for so we can spot trouble in time to react in a positive way. Welcome back to Transmitter 42, Kimberley Huggins. Well, welcome back, Kimberley, for another episode that you're going to help us live better, healthier lives.
So everyone's concerned about heart health. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about the top risk factors for heart disease. And they probably aren't what you may think they would be. Just about everyone, I think there's some honest, I should say, maybe not honest, but if you were to just say, what do you think is the number one risk factor for heart disease? And when I'm saying heart disease, it's kind of like a catch-all for what I would say cardiovascular disease, which also includes your arteries, your arteriosclerosis, anything to do with that. Most people, the first thing that would probably pop into your head would be cholesterol. And we would have to do another show totally on cholesterol to explain it all. But if you actually look at the research, there is very, very scant evidence. That cholesterol is far down on the list of what would be the top risks for cardiovascular disease. And as a matter of fact, you can actually, if you look at the actual research shows that most people that actually have a heart attack, what they would probably call myocardial infarction, that's a heart attack, have normal, whatever we want to call it now, in quotes, normal cholesterol. So kind of like jumbled all in this, I'm going to go over some of the risk factors for heart disease, but I would suggest doing some more research. There's a great book out there called, well, actually there's a couple, but The Cholesterol Myth is one, The Cholesterol Code is another one, and you can just find, there's several doctors out there on YouTube, cardiologists. Actually, there is a really good book written by a cardiologist called How to Stay Off My Operating Table. That's a really good book. So they're basically advocating, for a certain lifestyle to make you healthy. That's a whole nother topic, or I should say healthier. But just real quick to go over some of the actual risk factors. The number one risk factor for heart disease, cardiovascular disease, is actually type 2 diabetes. Okay.
Wow.
So, and
that's popular now, isn't it?
It's an epidemic in this country right now, unfortunately. And there are actually a lot of people who have it, don't know they have it, or they're certainly on their way to getting it. You may or may not have gone to a doctor for blood work, and if your A1C maybe is a little high, he might have said you were pre-diabetic, which I don't really like that term. I think you're either diabetic or not. It's kind of like being pregnant. You either are or you're not.
Right.
There's kind of like no in between. I also have found it unfortunate that I've recently discovered that they have recently changed the range for diabetes. So I don't know for how many years, but for the longest time, if your A1C was 5.6 or above, you were considered diabetic. Well, now they've moved that to 7. Now, I won't say every doctor's doing that or every health system is doing that, but now a lot of, well, the ones that are using 7 as the benchmark, they're saying if you fall below 7 now that it's controlled. And that's just not the case. You have diabetes. You're just not being told you have diabetes, and you're not being medicated for it or given any instructions or anything to try and help you, which is worse for you later on.
Why the sliding scale, do you think?
Because too many people have diabetes, and what they've been telling us for the last 50 years isn't working. It's making people sicker instead of better. And so they're in CYA mode.
No.
That's my opinion. But if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck.
Right.
So if you have type 2 diabetes, or if you are on the borderline, or you have it, you need to know that is the number one risk factor for having a heart attack, not your cholesterol. Okay. Number 2 would be something called your LPIR score, which is basically your insulin resistance score. Okay. And insulin resistance is something that they do not measure when you go to get your blood work. Okay. They will not give you an insulin resistance test. It's not in the regular blood work that you get. So you can be insulin resistant for 20, 30, 40 years. Okay. If you stay insulin resistant, you will get diabetes. But the issue is, if you took the insulin resistant test when you were 30 and found out you had insulin resistance, you could do something to fix it. If you don't know, you can't fix it. And you will get diabetes if your insulin resistance score stays high. The third risk factor for cardiovascular disease is metabolic syndrome. And metabolic syndrome is a cluster of symptoms, if you want to call it that, things that kind of tick off. And if you have, it's 5 items. And if you have a combination of those 5 items, you are at risk for all the diseases that kill us. Heart disease, stroke, cancer, the big 3, okay? So, and we can talk more about metabolic syndrome another day, but the basic 5 of metabolic syndrome is elevated fasting glucose, hypertension, high blood pressure, high triglycerides, low HDL cholesterol, and a large waist circumference. So if your waist to height ratio is over half, your waist is half or more of your height, that's a problem. So if you have any 2 of these, and certainly a lot of Americans actually have at least 3 of these, you have metabolic syndrome, which usually means, I would say 99.9% of the time, it means you have insulin resistance. And if this continues, you will get diabetes. It's not a maybe, I don't have anybody in my family that got it, so I'm not going to get it. You will get it. It's just a matter of time.
So age onset is going to onset you.
Right. And this is why we have now, which is actually kind of proof that adult onset diabetes has nothing to do with being an adult, because we have kids that are getting type 2 diabetes now.
My goodness.
Okay.
It's crept down into even younger ages now. Huh?
Right. And so it has nothing to do with being an adult, other than lots of times it takes, like in the past, it's taken 20, 30, 40. We knew maybe our grandparents that had diabetes. Okay. Well, it took them 20, 30, 40 years to get it. But now the fact that children are getting it, or people are getting it in their 30s, okay, it's not, you're a young person in your 30s. So if you're getting diabetes, something's wrong. What is different now than what used to be? That's a whole nother show. So metabolic syndrome would be the third risk for your cardiovascular disease. The next one would be high blood pressure. A lot of people have high blood pressure. A lot of people, that's kind of like their first health issue that they get. And they get medicated for it. And then if nothing else changes in your life, pretty soon the next domino falls, and then the next domino falls. Because if you're taking medication, you're just treating the symptom. You're not getting better. You're treading water, and in some cases, not very well. The next risk factor would be obesity on that list. I don't guess I really need to explain that too much.
That's something that can creep on you slowly.
And it does. It's very easy in our society, the way we eat in America, to just gain a little bit every month, every year. And then you wake up one day and you look at the picture and you see you gain, every year you're putting on weight. And you have to, and it's really unfortunate. I think a lot of people we're just taught so many things that are just wrong. And there's so much poured into the philosophy of eat less and exercise more. And I'm not saying exercise is wrong. I think everybody needs to be moving. Your body's meant to move. There's a lot of reasons to do exercise because muscle is longevity and you need to use it or you will lose it. But as far as your diet, especially once you get over 40, you can't outrun the kitchen. So whatever you're eating is doing
You can't
more.
outrun the kitchen.
Whatever you're eating is contributing more to your weight and your health issues than anything else. Next one on the list would be smoking. Need I say any more? If you're smoking, please stop. Find a way. Get help. You just need to quit.
Is that one thing that Americans are doing much less now?
Well, I mean, yes, the rest of the world isn't. I think the cigarette companies are perfectly happy not to market to Americans anymore because they can get everyone in Asia and Africa to buy their cigarettes. So they don't really care. But vaping is going to be a whole nother issue. Now, I don't really know if vaping correlates with a risk factor for heart disease. I know it does for lung disease, but we don't really have a lot of long-term research for vaping yet. I don't think there would be any plus side to it, but as far as a correlation or risk for heart disease, just don't know that. But back to smoking. If you're smoking, stop. Just stop. The last three, and I would just say on this list, when they do a study, anything, however they do the numbers, if you want to call it, they consider anything less than a 2 on this particular study. That's how they rate it. Anything less than a 2 is considered, they call it hazard ratios. Anything less than a 2 is considered insignificant, statistically insignificant, okay? So the last three on the list are physical inactivity. So, I talked about how exercise is important, but exercise doesn't really correlate to whether you're going to have a heart attack or not because it's a 1.53 on the hazard ratio. It's less than 2. It's considered statistically insignificant. You could be a great exerciser. You could sit on the couch all day long. Either one is not going to tell you where you're going to have more of a heart attack. I mean, you would think the person that exercised would have less of a chance of having a heart attack than the guy that sits on the couch all day, but it doesn't turn out that way. The next thing on the list would be your total cholesterol. has a hazard ratio of 1.39. I talked at the beginning about how the average person that has a heart attack has normal cholesterol. So this bears that out. Your hazard ratio of total cholesterol and LDL cholesterol is 1.39 and 1.38 respectively, considered insignificant.
I wonder why that's such a secret. Everyone assumes cholesterol is the reason. We've been raised our whole lives on that.
Well, my opinion, we've been taught that because follow the money, okay? There is no drug for type 2 diabetes. They would love to come up with one. They're trying. They've been trying for years, okay? But we do currently have a drug, several, as a matter of fact, for high cholesterol. And it's the number one prescribed drug in the country. So ask yourself, why are we prescribing a drug to
I would have thought blood pressure would have been, but interesting, cholesterol.
statins? Okay. So why are we prescribing a drug to lower something in your body that I would also add your body makes on its own? It needs it to function. Okay. Breast milk is 60% cholesterol. So your body has to have it. So why would we take a pill to lower something our body needs that the science and the studies bear out is not even a risk for a heart attack?
And what are the problems with too low a cholesterol?
Well, you're basically starving your brain. So
cholesterol is brain food.
yes, it is. And a lot of the studies that are, bearing themselves out, which are out there, it's just they get drowned out by the marketing, frankly, that's all it is, of the pharmaceutical industry, okay? Because the pharmaceutical industry, anybody who watches TV knows now, especially after COVID, it is on 24/7 telling you to take some kind of pill for some kind of condition. All of the news agencies, okay, that's 75% of their budget is
75 now.
Yes.
I'd heard it got to 50, but
it's 75. Well, okay, CNN is 75% of their budget comes from pharmaceutical.
big money.
Okay, so I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse. If you are taking a statin, I would urge you to research it. If you go into your doctor's office and you have questions for him and he gets angry, you need to find a new doctor. You have to advocate for yourself. Your doctor is supposed to be your partner. He's not God. You don't have to do what he says, okay? You have to get the information, and because you're the one that pays if the medication does something wrong to you. And there are significant side effects to statin medication. Lower cholesterol, something your body needs, so you get dementia, or the other side effect of a statin is diabetes. Okay? And just a side note on diabetes, that it is really an epidemic. And we're going to talk about that on some other episode.
That's fine.
But it is truly, truly a horrible disease. And I don't think people understand. I think people think they'll just, if I get diabetes, I'll just take a pill for it, or I'll just get the shot for it, and that's all there is to it. If you live with diabetes, that's not the end of the road. Your future is wounds that don't heal, a foot amputated, kidney dialysis, going blind. The list of horrific things that will happen to you is endless. And
I think many of our listeners know that there is a big problem of having diabetes, but you're connecting the dots of other illnesses that lead up to this, which is important.
Well, the true core issue is your insulin resistance number. So if you, and insulin is a hormone that your body has to have to function. So insulin in of itself is not bad, but insulin deals with energy in your body. And the more energy you put in your body, the higher your insulin has to stay. And if insulin is elevated all the time, your cells don't like that. So over time, you start to develop insulin resistance. And it is truly the core, the root cause of just about all of our diseases that we see in society right now. It's the root of high blood pressure. It's the root of your blood sugar staying high. It's the root of cardiovascular disease. It's just so many things can be reversed. Dare I say reversed, if you can bring your insulin under control.
Give our listeners one good book to read if they want to learn a little bit more. We'll list all the references in the show notes online at t42.am. But one good book to learn about the cholesterol and diabetes connection.
Well, there's several. I mentioned a couple already. So the cholesterol code, the cholesterol myth, the diabetes code by Jason Fung is really good. It kind of like explains why high insulin, high blood sugar is at the root of all of this. Just kind of a side note here, I would also like to add as kind of a side of how, we think, or we have, because we have been taught, you only know what you've been taught, and this is the thing. But you know better, you need to do better. So we all think cholesterol is bad. Or we may think there's bad cholesterol and there's good cholesterol. It is really not. They're really not. There's not bad and good. There's just cholesterol. And they have different functions in the body. But we also need to think about what we're eating, because that's what drives all of this. Okay? And we have been told for years, people my age, we came up thinking you have to eat, like, saturated fat's bad for you. Bad for you, bad for you. Got to eat less fat, less fat, less fat, less fat, less fat. And if I could say one book that just skewers that, there's a book called The Big Fat Surprise by Nina Teicholz. It's an excellent book as to why fat isn't bad for you. And as humans, we actually need it. Right. We actually need it in our diets to function, because fat is satiety, okay? And that keeps you from eating too much.
Okay. So what is a good roundabout help for our listeners on this grand topic? Obviously, look at some of the research that you've come up with. This research, is it relatively new, or has it been around a long time, or what?
The diet aspect of it has been around for forever.
How long? Okay. Roughly.
Well, we have diets. Okay, diabetes used to be called the sugar disease.
The sugar.
And so it was the sugar disease, and they just called it the sugar.
What, 1800s?
Yeah, yes. You can go, and there's actual published literature. Doctors published the diet they would recommend for people who had the sugar, okay?
Dare I ask, what is their suggestions for diet?
And if you look at it, it is a low carb, okay? And that's a big umbrella. So, if you're looking at low carb diets, it's a extremely low carb diet. So that means no sugar, no starches, no bread, no pasta, no potatoes, okay? And certainly none of the junk food, processed food that we have now, because we didn't have all that back then, okay? Heavy on animal protein, I know, shocking. But, and in the world of low carb, like if you're looking at low carb, a keto diet, ketogenic diet, which is not a fad. The ketogenic diet is a therapeutic diet that has been around for at least 200 years, okay? And it is used to treat people. So with certain, most notably epilepsy, but it's very therapeutic. And that would also include the carnivore diet. Okay? There's various versions of the carnivore diet, but all that is low carb. Okay? So low carb, carnivore, keto, all of that, that's not a fad. That has been around for hundreds of years. And if you're looking at strict carnivore, millions of years. Humans, if you believe in evolution, whatever you believe, if you believe in evolution, we evolved to become an apex predator because we ate meat, not because we ate grass.
Right.
So that's not the fad. The fad is what we're eating now. The fad is the fake food, the ultra-processed food, the plant-based foods, the Franken food, as I like to call it. Real food doesn't have ingredients, okay? And that's what you should be eating, real food. Now, if you have diabetes, you have if you don't take nothing else away from this, and if you have diabetes, please start eating low carb. Okay? You can get rid of your high blood pressure in 2 weeks. No joke. That's the first thing that will modify. And then you have to go to your doctor because you can't just stop taking your blood pressure medicine. You have to taper off. But the point is, the medical industry doesn't want you to think you can fix it or that you can heal it because they need you to need them. It doesn't have to be that way.
So I guess the good suggestion is become acquainted, learn what you need to learn. Do not dump your doctor, but start working with him and become educated so he's not just driving the boat and you become an educated patient.
Agreed. You should be a partner with your doctor. Your doctor should be your partner. You should work together. If you have questions, he should be willing to answer them. He should know. If he doesn't know, if he gets angry because you questioned him, if he refuses to answer your question and just wants you to take a pill, you don't have a partner. You've got a drug pusher for a doctor. And if you have a doctor like that, you need to find a new doctor.
Tell us about risk factors.
Okay, so we went over the risk factors earlier, and just to kind of sum that up really quick, you can impact every single one of these risk factors. Every single one, except smoking. I'll give you that one. Okay, smoking is in and of itself, you got to take care of that separate. You just got to quit. But every single other one, the diabetes, the insulin resistance score, metabolic syndrome, high blood pressure, obesity, waist to height circumference, physical inactivity, total and LDL cholesterol, every single one of those can be diminished and impacted by what you are or are not eating.
So diet is the first step to all of this.
Diet is the key.
Low carb be the first step.
Yes, definitely.
Well, we're out of time for this episode. Thanks, Kimberly, for bringing a different way of thinking about heart disease to our listeners. Please come back again. You have much more to tell us, do you not? And thanks to Transmitter 42 listeners here on WBCQ and our podcast website. Archives of this broadcast are available on our website at t42.am. If you have a comment about this episode, number 006, please send an email to radioshow@t42.am or mail a note to Transmitter 42, P.O. Box 100, Remington, Virginia, 22734. Thanks for listening. Please join us again next time on WBCQ Radio and T42.am.
Transmitter 42.